Hello everyone, I'm Michael Serapio. Canada's new finance minister held his first news conference this afternoon, but it was not the finance hat that Dominic LeBlanc was wearing. Rather, it was his role as public safety minister that he spoke, giving details of a $1.3 billion plan to strengthen the southern border.
We will propose to the American partners the creation of a new North American joint strike force to target transnational organized crime. This new joint strike force could include, for example, support in operational surges, dedicated synthetic drug units, expanded combined forces special enforcement units, bi-national integrated border enforcement teams, and new technical operations capacity and related infrastructure.
So, a new continental strike force to be proposed. Also announced today, new money for technology that will enhance the detection of fentanyl, new investigative capacity for Health Canada to track the source of illegal drugs, and a new aerial intelligence task force, among many other measures. Now, there are also new measures affecting migration, and to talk about this, we're now joined by the Minister for Immigration, Marc Miller. Minister, thank you for taking the time.
Thanks for having me on, Michael.
So among the measures you have laid out is a plan to streamline the asylum system to sort through illegitimate claims. I'm wondering how you're planning to do that when, for one, documentation can often be a challenge for asylum seekers, and two, the system itself is already overwhelmed.
Well, certainly over the last year or two, we've seen asylum claims that have gone up significantly as a result of a variety of measures. Canada's an attractive place. There are more displacement around the world than there has been in our history. But the credibility of the Immigration Refugee Board depends on its ability to deal with cases in a timely fashion. Now, that isn't currently the case, or is increasingly less the case. We're also seeing a number of illegitimate claims, whether it's from people that are coming in through ostensibly visas as tourists, or as international students and are not happy with paying 5 times the price that domestic students pay, and they claim asylum. We will have to present legislation that deals with us and deals with the illegitimate claims or the less legitimate claims in a way to expedite them quickly and remove them from this country. And that will require reform of our asylum legislation that will require the Parliament to come back and pass it. Now, the Bloc has given us some assurances that they want to see that done. The Conservative leader, if you trust him, and I don't trust him as far as I can throw him, has said that he would open up his silly privilege debate that has caused Parliament to be frozen for the last 3 months to pass reform on asylum seeking on the asylum system. So I think that's positive if you believe people at their word, but it'll require a legislative measure to be put into place to help the Immigration Refugee Board do its job properly, and also alleviate it from the pressure that we're increasingly seeing people making false claims. That includes also people coming potentially from the U.S. into Canada and abusing the Safe Third Country Agreement, waiting perhaps 14 days. We need a system to be able to deal with that, but that will come in legislation that we hope to introduce in the spring session.
Okay, so new legislation in the spring session. Does that mean then you're going to empower the Refugee Board to immediately expel people? What does that actually look like?
There's a lot of discussions going on with the IRB being more efficient in the current caseload, but potentially using other systems. I can't speak to it, obviously, until the legislation is actually presented, out of fairness to my colleagues in Parliament, but we are looking at a variety of measures that would seek to alleviate that. Immediately, however, I will be instructing and issuing a policy to make sure that people that are going to the border and putting pressure on the border, doing something called flagpoling, where people that are here on a work permit or whatnot go to the border or turn around right away, no intention of going to the U.S., and get immediate same-day service, whereas they would have to wait here in Canada. I'll be eliminating that loophole so to sort of remove an irritant with the U.S. that has been long-standing, and I think important for us to deal with, putting resources and pressure on U.S. border officials, on Canadian border officials, and allowing them, by alleviating it, to do other things that are more important. So that's an important concrete measure from today that will have immediate effect when we put it into place, which will be as soon as possible. And it'll satisfy the U.S.'s concern on that point as well, in addition to the measures that I've been taking over the course of the summer to reduce the flow of people going north-south from Canada into the U.S. through visas that they've obtained and come to Canada in theory to be tourists, and they're just going into the U.S. So shoring up those measures. The measures that I put into place this summer, Michael, reduced that flow by 84% if you look at the November numbers. So already work underway, but there's still a lot more to do, including putting into effect the measures that Minister LeBlanc talked about in the press conference today.
Okay, so we'll be looking towards that new legislation and for this $1.3 billion package to make its way through. But, you know, before we're done, Minister, of course, this announcement comes just some 36 hours after the resignation of Chrystia Freeland. And once again, the leadership of the Prime Minister is in question, in particular, being able to negotiate with the United States, with Donald Trump. I'm wondering whether or not you think it is time for the Prime Minister to step aside. And I appreciate you're his friend, but what do you say to that?
Well, look, I won't shy away from that. We've been close to friends for 40 years. We've also been professional colleagues, and I've been able to see his work up front. I have the deepest of trust in him and full confidence in his ability to lead us through these difficult times, the next 2 months, which will be consequential in our history. I don't think there's been as an important time, given the threat that's hanging over our heads of Trump, potentially with the ability of really hurting industry and getting people fired as a result of these crippling tariffs, to have someone in leadership to be able to fight back, to be able to give Canadians the assurance that we've got this relationship under control. Mr. Trudeau is road tested. We've had to deal with Mr. Trump during one of the most difficult points in our history, including a once-in-a-lifetime epidemic. There's no time for us to be in an election where we have no functional ability as a government to fight back as people are getting fired, so that should focus the mind. It doesn't mean that some people's criticisms shouldn't be heard, particularly within caucus, and that's a discussion that ideally we keep into caucus, but unfortunately has gone public. This announcement that we made today was planned regardless of what occurred from Friday to Monday, and it's one that we had planned for some weeks to roll out, and indeed it's something that we have to keep moving on in the next 45 to 60 days because this is critical to avoid the tariffs.
Can I ask, though, only because I appreciate what you're saying, that Mr. Trudeau has already dealt with Donald Trump before, but we're also in this different era where people are now openly questioning his leadership, those within caucus, and also his deputy prime minister in that resignation letter. And the point being made by many is that he should be given another mandate, be it through an election or even be tested, maybe even a leadership review. Does that need to happen in order to give Mr. Trudeau legitimacy at the table with Donald Trump?
Well, I think currently, if you want me to speculate, and I'm not going to speculate about a lot of the items that you put on the table because they are just that, but I don't think, I think the Americans would be quite happy to see someone else than Mr. Trudeau, because he knows how to fight, he knows how to stand up for Canadians. All we've ever seen from Pierre Poilievre, which is the alternative, is someone that speaks in rhymes and hasn't done anything in his 20 years in Parliament other than secure his own pension. So I wouldn't think that a guy like that would do anything more than roll over, face with an existential threat to industry, commerce, people. And I don't think we should be in an election or any form of uncertainty. The next 45 to 60 days are important. We need strong leadership. We need premiers to stiffen up as well and be on the same team and present a united front. And that's what I expect of our government, and that's what I expect. And I think that's what Canadians expect of us.
Minister Marc Miller, always appreciate the time. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Michael.